They thought we were weak because we asked politely. They mistook our diplomacy for fear, our patience for inability, our restraint for limitation. Across 1,000 worlds, the galaxy's dominant species had built empires on intimidation, conquest, and the systematic exploitation of those they deemed inferior. For 3 generations, humanity had endured their raids, their insults, their casual cruelty, always responding with measured words, always extending another chance for peace. But every civilization has a breaking point. Every species has a line that, once crossed, reveals what truly lies beneath the surface of civility. Earth was about to remind the galaxy of an ancient truth that conquerors always forget. The most dangerous predator is not the one that roars the loudest, but the one that has learned to control its bite. The message that would change everything was only 7 words long. The council chambers of the Galactic Concordance stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystalline floor, suspended in the void between stars by technology so ancient that no living species remembered its creators. 217 species held seats in this grand hall, representing civilizations that spanned millions of worlds and trillions of lives. The architecture itself was designed to humble anyone who entered. Vast pillars of compressed starlight rose to impossible heights, and the very walls displayed real-time feeds of 1,000 different suns, a reminder of the Concordance's reach. Ambassador Sella Vaughan of the Thracic Empire lounged in her gravity throne, her 6 eyes half closed in what those who knew her species recognized as supreme contentment. The Thracic had been members of the Concordance for over 4,000 standard cycles, and in that time they had mastered the art of using the Council's Byzantine regulations to further their own interests. Today was shaping up to be particularly profitable. The human delegation has filed another complaint, announced Council Speaker Giz, his translucent form flickering with what might have been annoyance. That makes 17 formal grievances in the past standard cycle. A wave of chittering, buzzing, and various other sounds of amusement rippled through the chamber. The humans had become something of a running joke in the Council. They had arrived on the galactic stage only 70 years ago, bringing with them an almost comical insistence on concepts like rights, sovereignty, and fair trade. The established powers had quickly learned that humanity's insistence on following proper channels made them easy to exploit. "What is it this time?" asked Representative Kuth of the Viralian Compact, his mandibles clicking in what passed for laughter among his kind. Another colony ship redirected through their space. Another trade vessel accidentally fired upon. The human ambassador stood to address the council. Commander Elena Vasquez was 53 years old, with grey threading through her black hair and lines around her eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights fighting battles with words instead of weapons. She had served in the Earth Defense Force during the First Contact Wars, before transitioning to diplomacy, a career change that many of her former colleagues considered a punishment rather than a promotion. "Honored Council," Elena began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation matrix that made communication possible among so many different species. 3 days ago, a Thracic raiding party attacked the human colony on New Serenity. They killed 234 civilians, including 61 children. They took another 108 colonists as slaves. This was not an accident. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate act of aggression against a registered and protected colony world. Sella Vaughan's eyes opened fully, focusing on the human with an expression that, in Thracic body language, conveyed utter disdain. "The Council has reviewed the matter. New Serenity was established within what the Concordance recognizes as contested space. Your colony should not have been there. The coordinates were cleared by the Council Survey Authority 18 months ago," Elena countered, pulling up holographic documentation that materialized in the air above her. "We have all the proper permits. We followed every regulation." "Reinterpreted," Speaker Zig said smoothly. "The matter of contested borders in the Orion sector has been under review for several cycles. Until the review is complete, the Concordance cannot take action against the Thracic Empire for enforcing what they claim as their sovereign territory." Elena felt her hands clench at her sides. This was the same pattern that had played out dozens of times before. Humans would follow the rules, obtain the proper documentation, do everything by the book. And then, when they were attacked, the rules would suddenly become flexible, subject to interpretation, pending review. "How long will this review take?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "These matters are complex," Zig replied. "Perhaps another 20 or 30 cycles. In the meantime, We recommend that humanity avoid establishing colonies in disputed regions, by which time the Thracic would have claimed a dozen more systems that humanity had legally surveyed and registered, and there would always be another review, another delay, another reason why the Council couldn't act. Elena took a deep breath. She had been authorized by Earth's unified government to deliver a message, but she had been instructed to try the normal channels first. She had tried. For 3 generations, humanity had tried. Speaker Zij, I would like to enter into the official record a formal warning from the government of Earth and all associated human colonies. The chamber, which had been filled with the ambient noise of hundreds of different species, fell silent. A warning was a serious diplomatic action, one that carried weight in the Concordance's legal framework. It was also something that species as new and weak as humanity typically avoided, as it could be seen as provocative. You may proceed, Zig said, his form flickering with what might have been surprise. Elena activated her communications implant. Back on Earth, in a bunker deep beneath the unified government headquarters in Geneva, she knew that President Chen was watching this moment with the rest of the Security Council. They had debated this action for months, weighing every possible consequence. But in the end, they had all agreed on one fundamental truth. If you let bullies take everything from you without fighting back, they will never stop. For 70 years, Elena said, her voice steady and clear, humanity has sought to join the galactic community as peaceful neighbors. We have followed your laws, respected your traditions, and offered friendship to all species. We have endured insults to our dignity, theft of our resources, and attacks on our people. We have done this because we believed in the principles that the Concordance claims to represent. She paused, looking around the chamber at the hundreds of alien faces, many of which were regarding her with barely concealed contempt or amusement. But we have reached the end of our patience. The attack on New Serenity was not an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern of aggression that this council has refused to address. So I am here to deliver a message from Earth to be recorded in the official archives and broadcast to all member species. Elena activated the holographic projector, and a message appeared in the air above the council floor, translated into every language known to the Concordance. It was simple. 7 words that would echo across the galaxy. Stop now, or civility ends. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then, the chamber erupted in sounds that the translation matrix struggled to categorize. Laughter from some species, outrage from others, disbelief from most. Selvorn rose from her throne, her body language conveying aggressive dominance. Is this supposed to frighten us, human? You threaten the Concordance? You, whose entire species controls fewer than 30 worlds? You, who have been members of this council for barely a lifetime? It is not a threat, Elena replied calmly. It is a warning. There is a difference. A threat is a promise of future action if conditions are not met. A warning is a courtesy extended to allow others to change their behavior before they discover consequences they were not prepared for. And what consequences could humanity possibly impose on the Concordance? Kuth demanded. Your fleet numbers fewer than 2,000 vessels. The Thracic Empire alone commands over 100,000 warships. You have no allies, no leverage, no power here. Elena smiled, and something in that expression made several of the nearer delegates shift uncomfortably. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something that others did not. You are correct that our fleet is small, she acknowledged. You are also correct that we have no traditional allies. But you are making assumptions based on what you think you know about humanity. You have decided that because we have chosen to be civil, we are incapable of being anything else. You have mistaken our preference for peace as our only option. She deactivated the holographic message and began walking toward the chamber exit. The message has been delivered and recorded. What you do with it is your choice. But understand this. Humanity did not climb to the top of our world's food chain by being the biggest or the strongest. We did it by being the most adaptable, the most creative, and the most persistent. For 70 years, we have adapted to your system. We have been creative in working within your rules. We have been persistent in seeking peaceful solutions. At the doorway, she turned back one final time. The message will be broadcast on all standard channels in 72 hours. After that, if attacks on human colonies continue, you will discover what else we are capable of. After Elena left, the council dissolved into chaos. Some delegates demanded immediate action against humanity for their insolence. Others called for economic sanctions. A few, mainly the smaller and newer species, remained silent, their own histories with the Concordance's powerful members giving them a different perspective on events. Speaker Zeg called for order, but it took nearly an hour to restore calm. When he finally managed to quiet the chamber, it was Sella Vaughan who spoke first. "I move that we ignore this pathetic display," she said. "Humanity is trying to bluff from a position of weakness. If we show them that threats will not be tolerated, they will learn their place." "I second the motion," Kuth added. "In fact, I propose we make an example of them. Let us see how they respond when every trade route they use suddenly becomes contested space. Let their colonies starve, and then they will remember the value of civility." Of the 217 species present, 183 voted in favor of economic sanctions against humanity. 27 abstained. 7 voted against. In the human delegation's quarters, Elena watched the vote tally appear on her terminal. She had expected this result. They all had. She opened a secure channel to Earth. President Chen's face appeared on the screen, lined with concern but resolute. "They voted for sanctions," Elena reported. "Overwhelmingly." "Then they've made their choice. Return to Earth, Ambassador. Your work there is done. Everything else is now in Admiral Morrison's hands." "Mr. President," Elena said carefully, "are we really going to do this? Once we start, there's no going back. They've given us no other option, Elena. You tried. God knows you tried for 7 years to make them listen. But they won't stop until someone makes them stop." Chen's expression hardened. "Broadcast the message in 72 hours as scheduled, and may history forgive us for what comes next." The channel closed. Elena sat alone in the darkened room, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, human colonies were preparing for what was to come. On Earth, factories that had been quietly building in secret for 3 years were increasing production. And in the outer reaches of the solar system, a fleet was assembling that would make the galaxy understand one simple truth. Humanity had been civil because they chose to be, not because they had to be. The 72-hour countdown began. On New Serenity, among the ruins of the colony that the Thracic had destroyed, Sarah Mitchell stood beside a makeshift grave. Her daughter was buried there, along with 60 other children who had been killed when the raiders attacked the school. Sarah was 41 years old, a xenobiologist who had moved to New Serenity to study the planet's unique ecosystem. She had never been a violent person. She had dedicated her life to understanding and preserving life. But as she stood there, reading the message that Earth had broadcast to the galaxy, she felt something shift inside her. For 3 years, she had lived with grief and rage, watching as the Council did nothing, as the Concordance ignored every plea for justice. She had begun to believe that her daughter's death would simply become another statistic, another footnote in humanity's unsuccessful attempt to join the galactic community. Now, reading those 7 words, she understood that Earth had not forgotten, that humanity had not accepted this as the price of admission to the stars. She placed a hand on the grave marker. "They're going to answer for what they did to you, Emma," she whispered. "All of them." Similar scenes were playing out across every human colony. On New Terra, on Prosperity Station, on the mining outpost at Kepler, 442b, everywhere that humanity had established a presence, people who had lost loved ones to the Concordance's indifference were hearing the same message. The age of asking politely was over. The age of consequences was about to begin. And the galaxy was about to learn that the most dangerous thing you can do to a predator is teach it that mercy is weakness. The broadcast went live exactly 72 hours after Ambassador Vasquez delivered her warning. Every communication frequency, every trade channel, every diplomatic network across the galaxy received the same transmission simultaneously. It was impossible to ignore and impossible to block. The holographic message appeared first, those same 7 words floating in the void. "Stop now, or civility ends." Then a human face filled the screen. Admiral Jessica Morrison was 60 years old, with silver hair cut military short and eyes that had seen combat in every major human conflict of the past 3 decades. She wore the dark blue uniform of the Earth Defense Force, decorated with medals that most alien species would not recognize. Behind her, the emblem of United Earth hung on the wall, a simple blue marble against the black of space. "My name is Admiral Jessica Morrison," she began, speaking in a calm, measured tone. "I am the Supreme Commander of Earth's military forces. This message is directed to all member species of the Galactic Concordance, and specifically to those civilizations that have attacked human colonies, stolen human property, or harmed human citizens." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. For 3 generations, humanity has operated under the assumption that the Concordance was a legitimate governing body dedicated to peaceful coexistence and mutual prosperity. We believed that if we followed your laws, respected your territories, and sought resolution through proper diplomatic channels, we would be treated as equals. Morrison's expression hardened. We were wrong. The Concordance is not a government. It is a protection racket run by the strong to exploit the weak. Your laws exist not to ensure justice, but to justify predation. Your diplomatic processes are designed not to resolve conflicts, but to delay them until the powerful have taken what they want. Across the galaxy, in council chambers and throne rooms and command centers, beings of 1,000 different species watched this transmission with reactions ranging from amusement to outrage to growing concern. The attack on New Serenity was not an isolated incident, Morrison continued. Over the past 70 years, human colonies have been raided 147 times. 15,632 human beings have been killed. Another 4,000 have been taken as slaves. Our trade vessels have been pirated over 2,000 times. Our diplomatic envoys have been assaulted, insulted, and in 16 cases murdered. She pulled out a holographic display showing a map of human space, marked with red indicators at each location where an attack had occurred. The sheer number of markers made the map look like it was bleeding. We have filed formal complaints for every incident. We have sought justice through your legal system. We have offered compensation, negotiation, mediation. The response has been consistent. Delays, reviews, jurisdictional disputes, and ultimately inaction. Morrison leaned forward, and when she spoke again, her voice carried an edge of steel. So let me be absolutely clear about what happens next. This transmission marks the end of humanity's participation in the Concordance's system. We no longer recognize the authority of the Council. We no longer accept the legitimacy of your laws. And we no longer consider ourselves bound by the restrictions those laws placed upon us. On the bridge of the Thracic warship Devastation's Edge, Commander Grelth watched the transmission with his bridge crew. They were currently en route to another human colony, one that survey data suggested held valuable mineral deposits. The plan was simple. Arrive, demand the humans leave, and if they refused, remove them by force. It was a strategy that had worked perfectly dozens of times before. "Is she seriously threatening the Empire?" his tactical officer asked, mandibles clicking with laughter. "With what? Their toy fleet?" Grelth was about to respond when Morrison's next words made him freeze. Effective immediately, the Admiral said, "Any vessel that attacks a human colony, fires upon a human ship, or abducts human citizens will be destroyed, not disabled, not captured, destroyed. There will be no warnings, no negotiations, no opportunities to surrender." She paused, letting that sink in. You may be wondering how humanity, with our limited fleet, intends to enforce this policy. Allow me to demonstrate. The transmission cut to external camera footage from what appeared to be a human military vessel. The view screen showed empty space, the kind of void between star systems where ships traveled through hyperspace lanes. Then something emerged from hyperspace. It was a Thracic raider, one of the fast attack ships they used for hit-and-run strikes on poorly defended targets. The ship was immediately recognizable by its predatory design, all sharp angles and weapon ports. "This vessel is the Thracic raider Crimson Talon," Morrison's voice narrated over the footage. "Approximately 1 hour ago, it attacked a human mining station in the Kepler Private 62 system, killing 37 civilians. Our request for Council intervention was denied due to insufficient evidence of Thracic involvement, despite the ship's identification signature being recorded by multiple sources. Another ship became visible, but this one was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. It was smaller than the Thracic raider, sleek and dark, seeming to absorb light rather than reflect it. There were no obvious weapon ports, no visible engine exhausts, nothing that identified it as military hardware by conventional standards. This is the EDS consequence," Morrison continued. "It is one of 300 vessels of its class that Earth has been building for the past 3 years. The Concordance was aware of this construction as we filed all the required notifications. What you classified as civilian research vessels are In fact, something quite different. On the footage, the Crimson Talon seemed to notice the human ship. Its weapons came online, plasma cannons charging for what would clearly be a devastating first strike. The Thracic Raiders were known for their overwhelming firepower, capable of reducing smaller vessels to atoms in seconds. The consequence didn't fire. Instead, something else happened. The space around the Thracic Raider began to shimmer, a visual distortion that grew more pronounced with each passing second. Grelth watched in confusion, trying to understand what he was seeing. It looked almost like the Raider was being compressed, its hull buckling inward, even though there was no visible force being applied. "Humans have a saying," Morrison's voice continued calmly, almost conversationally. "If you can't beat them with strength, beat them with intelligence." We realized early on that we could not match the Concordance's military might through conventional means. Your species have been building warships for thousands of years. Your weapons are powerful. Your shields are strong. Your fleets are vast. The Thracic Raider was collapsing now, its hull cracking like an egg under invisible pressure. Atmosphere vented into space, freezing instantly. Emergency pods began launching, but they too were caught in whatever field was affecting the ship. "So we built something different," Morrison said. "The Consequence-class vessels don't use conventional weapons. They use localized gravity manipulation. Each ship carries a miniaturized singularity generator, allowing it to create controlled gravitational fields. What you're watching is a Thracic warship being crushed by its own mass as we increase the gravitational constant in its immediate vicinity. The Raider imploded entirely, compressed into a sphere roughly 10 meters in diameter. The escape pods suffered the same fate. In less than 30 seconds, a ship that had murdered 37 human beings ceased to exist. There were 73 crew members aboard the Crimson Talon," Morrison said. "All of them participated in the attack on our mining station. All of them are now dead. This is not murder, this is justice." The transmission cut back to Morrison in her office. "Every Consequence-class vessel is currently deploying to human space. They will patrol our colonies, escort our trade ships, and respond to any acts of aggression. They are autonomous, equipped with artificial intelligence systems designed for one purpose: to protect human interests by any means necessary." She pulled up another holographic display, this one showing a star chart with hundreds of markers indicating ship positions. "As of this moment, we have 287 of these vessels operational. They are faster than any ship in the Concordance fleet. They cannot be detected by standard sensors. And they require no crew, which means we can deploy them in numbers that would be impossible for traditional warships. On dozens of worlds, in command centers and war rooms, military strategists were already running calculations. What Morrison was describing changed everything. A weapon system that didn't rely on conventional firepower, that couldn't be defended against with shields or armor, that could be deployed in swarms without risking personnel. It was a nightmare scenario. "But that's not all," Morrison continued. "We understand that some species may view this as an escalation. Some may consider retaliatory strikes against Earth itself. This would be inadvisable." The display changed again, showing Earth from orbit, beautiful blue and green and white, the cradle of humanity spinning peacefully in the void. "Earth has always been your primary target, hasn't it? Our home world, where billions of humans live. You've assumed that if things ever got serious, you could simply threaten Earth and we would back down. That our attachment to our home would be our weakness." Morrison's smile was cold. 3 months ago, we completed a project we called the Aegis Network. 600 satellites in synchronized orbit around Earth, each equipped with the same gravity manipulation technology used by our Consequence-class vessels. If any hostile fleet approaches our home system, those satellites can create a gravitational barrier that will crush any vessel attempting to pass through it. She pulled up footage of a test showing asteroids being vaporized as they approached an invisible boundary around a test area. "We've tested this system extensively. It works. And unlike shields, which can be overwhelmed with enough firepower, the Aegis network becomes more effective the more mass you throw at it. The larger your fleet, the stronger the gravitational forces become." Across the Concordance, species that had been considering military responses felt a chill of uncertainty. This changed the calculus entirely. Earth had made itself untouchable. "Now some of you are probably thinking that you could destroy our colonies," Morrison said, as if reading their thoughts. "That even if Earth is protected, you could punish humanity by attacking our settlements elsewhere. I want to be very clear about what will happen if you try. Her expression became absolutely serious. We have identified the home worlds of every species that has attacked human interests. The Thracic homeworld, the Vralian primary colonies, the core systems of the Kessic Commonwealth. We know where you live. She let that hang in the air for a moment. Each of those worlds is currently being monitored by Consequence-class vessels equipped with weapons far more powerful than the one you saw destroy the Crimson Talon. These ships carry antimatter charges, each one capable of cracking a planet's crust. They are in position. They are armed, and they have standing orders. If Earth or any human colony comes under attack by military forces from your species, your homeworld will be destroyed. The silence that followed this declaration was absolute. Morrison had just announced a mutual destruction doctrine, but one where humanity held all the cards. You may think I'm bluffing, she continued. You may believe that humans couldn't actually commit genocide, that our moral systems wouldn't allow such an action. And you're right. Under normal circumstances, such an order would be unconscionable. But these are not normal circumstances. You have spent 70 years teaching us that mercy is weakness, that following rules is for fools, that might makes right. Morrison stood, and the camera angle widened to show the full weight of her presence. So we learned your lessons. We adapted to your system. And now you're going to learn our lessons. She began listing demands, each one clear and non-negotiable. First, all human citizens currently held as slaves by any concordant species will be released immediately and returned to human space. You have one standard week for every human still in captivity after that deadline. We will destroy one of your military vessels. We don't care which ones. Our ships will choose randomly. Second, all territorial claims that overlap with legally registered human colonies are hereby rejected. Those colonies are ours. Attacks on them will be treated as acts of war. Third, human trade vessels will travel freely through all concordant space without harassment. Any attempt to pirate, tax, or restrict our commercial activity will result in the destruction of the vessels responsible. Fourth, the Concordance Council will formally acknowledge human sovereignty and recognize Earth's withdrawal from the Concordance legal system. We will maintain diplomatic relations, but we will no longer submit to your authority. Morrison walked closer to the camera. These demands are not negotiable. They are not subject to review or committee deliberation. They are reality, effective immediately. You have 1 week to comply with the demand regarding enslaved humans. The other dams are permanent. She paused. One final time. Humanity came to the stars hoping to find friends. Instead, we found bullies, predators, and cowards hiding behind laws they didn't believe in. You taught us that the galaxy respects only strength, so we became strong. You taught us that rules are for the weak, so we stopped following your rules. Morrison's final words were delivered with quiet intensity. The message we broadcast was simple. Stop now, or civility ends. You chose not to stop, so here we are. The age of civility is over. Welcome to the age of consequences. The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy to process what had just occurred. In council chambers, emergency sessions were called. Fleet admirals consulted with their strategists. Political leaders calculated their options. And on the devastation's edge, Commander Grelf stared at his view screen, where his navigation officer had just pulled up their current course. They were 3 days from the human colony they had planned to raid. Commander, his first officer said quietly. Orders? Grelf thought about the crushed remains of the Crimson Talon. He thought about antimatter charges orbiting his homeworld. He thought about 73 crew members who had been reduced to a sphere of compressed matter in 30 seconds. Set course for home, he ordered. Maximum speed. And send a message to the fleet. Avoid all human territory until further notice. He wasn't the only commander making that choice. Across the galaxy, warships that had been preparing to prey on human colonies suddenly found urgent business elsewhere. Raiding parties were recalled. Military exercises were postponed. Earth had spoken. And for the first time in 70 years, the galaxy was listening. 6 days after Admiral Morrison's broadcast, Ambassador Elena Vasquez stood in the same council chambers where she had delivered Earth's warning. The atmosphere had changed dramatically. Where before there had been casual contempt and barely concealed mockery, now there was tension thick enough to cut with a blade. The chamber was packed. Every species had sent representatives, and many had brought military advisors and security personnel. Armed guards lined the walls, something Elena had never seen before in the supposedly neutral space of the council. Speaker Jiz's translucent form flickered with agitation as he called the emergency session to order. "The council recognizes Ambassador Vasquez of Earth," he announced, his tone stripped of the condescension that had colored their previous interactions. Elena walked to the central podium, carrying a data tablet. She looked different than she had a week ago. There was a confidence in her bearing now, a certainty that came from knowing your position had changed from supplicant to equal. "Honored Council," she began, and several delegates shifted uncomfortably at the word honored. It was the proper form of address, but coming from Elena now, it sounded almost sarcastic. "I am here to provide a status update on Earth's demands." She activated her tablet, and holographic displays materialized throughout the chamber, showing real-time data feeds. As of 3 hours ago, 4,132 human citizens have been released from captivity and are currently being repatriated to human space. This represents approximately 98% of all enslaved humans that we have been able to identify. Sella Vaughan shifted in her gravity throne, her 6 eyes focused intently on Elena. The Thracic had released over 2,000 slaves in the past week, more than they had freed in the previous century combined. It had cost her empire enormous sums of money and severely damaged their labor economy. But the alternative, watching consequence-class vessels systematically destroy their military fleet, had been unacceptable. There are, however, 73 individuals still unaccounted for, Elena continued. We have given various species until the end of today to locate and release these people. We understand that some may have been sold to private owners, moved to remote locations, or otherwise difficult to track down. We are willing to show some flexibility on the timeline for these specific cases. She paused. Then her expression hardened. However, there are 16 humans who we know are being held by the Kessic Commonwealth. We know their locations, we know their names. And we know that the Commonwealth is deliberately refusing to release them as a test of Earth's resolve. Delegate Torash of the Kessic Commonwealth rose to his feet, his scaled head crest flaring in challenge. The Commonwealth does not respond to threats from... He never finished the sentence. Elena tapped her tablet, and the holographic display changed to show space near one of the Kessic Commonwealth's major military shipyards. 3 Kessic destroyers were visible, powerful warships that represented a significant investment of resources and technology. Then, like something out of a nightmare, the ships began to collapse. Hulls buckled, superstructures twisted, weapons arrays crumpled like paper. In the span of 20 seconds, 3 state-of-the-art military vessels were reduced to compressed spheres of debris. The footage was live. It was happening right now, while the council watched. "Those were the first 3 vessels," Elena said calmly over Torash's shocked silence. "In 14 hours, when the deadline expires, we will destroy 3 more. Every 8 hours after that, we will destroy 3 additional ships until all 16 humans are released. We are not negotiating. We are not bluffing. We are simply enforcing the terms we announced." Torash sank back into his seat, his crest flattening in submission. "The humans will be released within the hour," he said quietly. "Excellent," Elena replied. "I am pleased the Commonwealth has chosen to comply. It would be unfortunate to lose such fine vessels." She turned back to address the full council. "I want to be clear about what has changed and what has not. Earth does not seek conflict with the Concordance. We do not wish to conquer your worlds, steal your resources, or dominate your species. All we have ever wanted was to be left alone to live in peace." She pulled up a new display showing the territorial map of human space. "These are our colonies. These are our trade routes. These are our borders. We will defend them absolutely. But we have no interest in expansion at your expense. We don't want your territory." A smaller delegate from a species Elena didn't immediately recognize stood hesitantly. "Ambassador Vasquez, many of us have watched what has transpired with mixed feelings. The Concordance has long been dominated by a few powerful species who have used the Council's mechanisms to exploit the rest of us. Humanity's actions have exposed weaknesses in that system. Some of us wonder, would Earth be willing to help ensure that such exploitation doesn't continue? Elena had been expecting this question. The intelligence reports from Earth's diplomatic corps had predicted that smaller species, those who had also suffered under the Concordance's protection racket, might see humanity as potential allies against the established powers. Earth is willing to negotiate mutual defense agreements with any species that approaches us in good faith, she said carefully. We are also willing to share certain technologies on a limited basis, though I should be clear that our gravity manipulation systems will remain exclusively under human control for the foreseeable future. The chamber erupted in multiple species trying to speak at once. Speaker Zhizh struggled to maintain order as delegates shouted questions, made demands, or simply expressed outrage at the suggestion that Earth might form its own power block within the galaxy. It was Representative Kuth of the Vralian Compact who finally cut through the noise. He rose slowly, his massive frame commanding attention. Ambassador Vasquez, let us speak plainly. What you are proposing is the destruction of the Concordance as we know it. For 4,000 years, the Council has maintained galactic order through a system of laws and regulations. You are suggesting we replace it with a system based on what? The threat of force? Mutual destruction? Elena met his eyes calmly. Representative Kuth, the Concordance has never been based on law and order. It has been based on the threat of force applied by powerful species against weaker ones. The only difference is that now, humanity has proven that we are not weak. We are simply offering other species who have been victimized by this system the same protection we have created for ourselves. And if we refuse? Salavorn demanded. If the established powers of the Concordance choose to unite against this threat you represent, then you will lose, Elena said simply. And you know it. Our defensive capabilities are absolute. Our offensive capabilities are sufficient to destroy any fleet you could assemble. And unlike you, we don't need to worry about protecting supply lines or maintaining occupation forces. Our weapons are autonomous, our defenses are permanent, and our resolve is complete. But more than that, you cannot unite against us because you don't trust each other. The Thracic Empire would never put its fleet under Vralian command. The Kessic Commonwealth would never accept Thracic leadership. You have spent thousands of years competing with each other, undermining each other, using the Concordance as a tool to advance your own interests at each other's expense. It was true, and everyone in the chamber knew it. The power politics of the Concordance had always been a delicate balance, with major species forming temporary alliances that dissolved as soon as their immediate interests diverged. Humanity doesn't have that problem, Elena continued. We are one species with one government and one unified military command. When we make a decision, we can implement it immediately, without negotiation or compromise or political maneuvering. That gives us an advantage you cannot match. She pulled up one final display, showing the current disposition of Earth's Consequence-class fleet. Currently, we have 307 operational vessels, with another 100 in final construction. By this time next year, we will have over 700. In 5 years, we could have 2,000 if we choose to invest the resources. The implications were staggering. A fleet of 2,000 ships, each capable of destroying conventional vessels without taking return fire, able to operate indefinitely without crew, impossible to detect with standard sensors. It would represent a military force more powerful than anything the Concordance had ever seen. So here is what I propose, Elena said. The Concordance continues to exist. The Council continues to meet. But we implement some changes. First, the review system that allows powerful species to delay justice indefinitely is abolished. Complaints are addressed within a fixed time frame, or the injured party has the right to seek other remedies. Second, military action against registered colonies by any member species results in automatic sanctions regardless of claimed territorial disputes. If you want to contest borders, you do it through negotiation, not invasion. Third, the practice of enslaving citizens of other species is banned entirely. Any species found in violation faces immediate economic and diplomatic consequences. These reforms don't benefit only humanity. They protect every species here from the predation we have all endured. The difference is that now, there's a power that can enforce these rules. Speaker Zur was silent for a long moment, his form flickering rapidly as he processed the implications. Finally, he spoke. What you're proposing is a fundamental restructuring of galactic governance, with Earth as the enforcer of these new rules. Why should we trust that humanity won't simply become the new dominant power, using these weapons to impose your will on others? Elena had saved this revelation for last, because in 6 months we will be releasing the technical specifications for the Consequence-class gravity manipulation system to all Concordance members. The chamber fell absolutely silent. You what? Celavon demanded, her voice containing genuine shock for the first time. We're going to share the technology, Elena repeated calmly. Oh, not the complete weapons systems. We're not stupid, but the fundamental principles, the theoretical frameworks, the basic engineering, enough that any species with sufficient technical capability can begin developing their own versions. Why would you do that? Torash asked, sounding genuinely confused. You hold all the power. Why would you give it away? Elena smiled. Because we learned something about humanity during these past 70 years of being bullied and exploited. We learned that we're better at innovation than any species in the concordance. You've had thousands of years to develop your technologies incrementally. We've had less than a century of space travel, and we've already matched or exceeded your capabilities in several fields. She pulled up a schematic of the gravity manipulation system. By the time you figure out how to build your own versions of this technology, and some of you will, eventually, we'll have moved on to the next innovation. Maybe we'll have developed better weapons. Maybe we'll have invented new defenses. Maybe we'll have discovered something none of us have imagined yet. But whatever it is, we'll be ahead of you. And in the meantime, she continued, giving you this technology serves our interests. It means we're not the only species with the ability to enforce the new rules. It means the burden of maintaining order doesn't fall solely on Earth. And it means that the next time some species decides to start raiding and enslaving, there will be multiple powers capable of stopping them. It was a masterstroke of diplomacy, and Elena could see the understanding dawning across the chamber. By sharing the technology, Earth wasn't giving up its advantage. It was ensuring that the balance of power would never again be concentrated in the hands of a few aggressive empires. Representative Kuth stood again. You've planned this carefully, he acknowledged. Every aspect of your strategy has been designed to not just change the balance of power, but to fundamentally restructure how the galaxy operates. We had 70 years to think about it, Elena replied. 70 years of being attacked and seeing our complaints ignored. 70 years of watching the concordance protect the strong and exploit the weak. We used that time well. She deactivated the displays and picked up her tablet. I will leave the Council to deliberate on the proposed reforms. Earth will implement them in our own sphere of influence, regardless of what the concordance decides. But we hope you'll choose to adopt them galaxy-wide. They would make all of us safer. As she turned to leave, the small delegate, who had asked about alliances earlier, stood again. Ambassador Vasquez, on behalf of the Telian Collective, I want to say thank you for having the courage to do what many of us have wished we could do for generations. Elena paused, looking at the delegate with genuine warmth. You're welcome. And if the Telian Collective would like to discuss a mutual defense treaty, my government would be very interested in those conversations. She left the chamber to the sounds of dozens of species beginning to argue, negotiate, and recalculate their positions. The galaxy would never be the same. 3 months later, Ambassador Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Earth Embassy Station, orbiting the neutral zone between human space and the core concordance territories. Behind her, diplomats from 47 different species worked in offices spread across 3 kilometers of station, negotiating treaties, coordinating trade, and building the framework for what some were already calling the new concordance. President Chen stood beside her, having made the journey from Earth for the station's official opening ceremony. They watched as ships from dozens of worlds came and went, a symbol of the new era of galactic cooperation. Do you think they'll actually adopt the reforms? Chen asked. Most of them already have, Elena replied. The small species jumped at it immediately. Even some of the mid-tier powers have signed on. The big empires are still resisting, but they're losing influence every day. And the technology sharing? On schedule. We've already had 7 species successfully replicate the basic gravity manipulation systems. None of them have figured out how to weaponize it yet, but they will eventually. Chen nodded. And by then, we'll have developed the quantum displacement drive. And maybe the matter reconstruction matrix. Our science teams have 17 different projects in development, any one of which could be the next strategic advantage. Staying ahead of the curve, Chen mused. It's what humanity does best, Elena agreed. We adapt. We innovate. We overcome. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the stars. Somewhere out there, on 100 different worlds, human colonies were growing without fear of raids. Human traders were conducting business without being pirated. Human children were growing up in a galaxy that had learned finally to respect their species. Do you ever wonder if we did the right thing? Chen asked quietly. If there was a better way than threatening mutual destruction. Elena thought about that question, one she had asked herself 1,000 times. We tried every other option for 70 years, Mr. President. We asked politely. We followed their rules. We sought justice through their system. None of it worked. She turned to face him directly. They didn't respect our rights or our lives. They only respected our weapons. I wish the galaxy was a better place where reason and morality mattered more than force. But it isn't. So we became strong enough to make them listen. Chan nodded slowly. Stop now, or civility ends.
They didn't stop, Elena said.
So we showed them what lies on the other side of civility. And now, ironically, we're more civilized than we've ever been. 'Cause now we can negotiate from strength. A message alert chimed on Elena's tablet. She glanced at it and smiled. The Thracic Empire just formally requested a trade agreement. Favorable terms, equal partnership, all the proper diplomatic protocols. Sela Vaughn must be choking on that treaty, Chen observed. Probably, Elena agreed. But she's smart enough to know that the alternative is worse. We're not their victims anymore. And they're starting to realize that being our trade partners is more profitable than being our enemies. As night cycles fell across the station and the lights of 1,000 different ships painted stars in the void, humanity stood watch over the galaxy they had earned the right to call home. Not through conquest, not through domination, but through the simple, brutal lesson that had shaped Earth's own history time and time again. Peace comes not from hoping for kindness, but from being too dangerous to attack. The message had been delivered, the consequences had been demonstrated, and the galaxy had learned. Civility had ended. But in its place, something better had begun to grow. A civilization built not on exploitation, but on mutual respect, born of mutual strength. And Earth, the young species that had been dismissed as weak and irrelevant, stood at the center of it all, proving that humanity's greatest weapon had never been their gravity manipulators or their autonomous fleets. It was their refusal to accept being victims. The age of consequences had arrived, and it was here to stay.